Hello, I'm Yvette Hardy and I'm speaking to you from Cape Town, South Africa. So the impact of COVID-19 on theatre in South Africa has been severe. It's been a very, very difficult time for artists here as in other parts of the world. Theatres have largely remained closed under shutdown. There have been periods when theatres have been able to open up to much reduced audiences, but these have been relatively limited periods of time, and certainly not enough to sustain either the theatres or the artists without some kind of support from government. Some theatres have had to close their doors entirely. An iconic theatre named after our probably most famous playwright, Athol Fugard, the Fugard Theatre in Cape Town, has closed down entirely, and it's unlikely that it will be opening anytime soon because it was not in any way state funded. Many of the independent theatres have also had to remain closed because it simply hasn't been financially viable for them to open. The state-funded theatres have, in many cases, turned their spaces into places where recording and filming of material can happen, sometimes to a limited audience. And this has been very useful because many artists have been unable to afford to take their work online. And so the state theatres or the state-funded theatres' role in supporting that has been useful. Some theatres, like the Baxter Theatre, which is only partially funded by the university, have had other kinds of programs like Baxter Radio, where they paid the artists who were on their books for the period to do other kinds of work, to create audio versions of plays that could be downloaded by school children who were studying those plays. Obviously, children have also had to learn virtually during this time, many of them, so that has been helpful. Or the creation of new radio-style work. Our festivals have also been deeply impacted. Many of them did not take place, or if they did take place, they took place as an online festival. The National Arts Festival turned around in a very short space of time last year after lockdown to become the first virtual festival that happened in our country. And this year it was planning to be a hybrid festival, and there were in fact some performances that happened live in different towns. So this was quite an unusual move. A festival that normally takes place in a small university town in the Eastern Cape was now having an outreach where it had performances happening in different cities of South Africa. But unfortunately, these coincided with the start of the third wave. So some of those performances still took place with very limited audiences. Others had to be without an audience entirely. But again, that opportunity was utilized for the work to be recorded so that it could then be shown on the virtual National Arts Festival, which is ongoing at the moment, and in fact will be available until the end of July. So if you're interested, you are welcome to attend the National Arts Festival. You can find it on its website. So festivals have had to adapt. This has meant that sometimes recorded work is happening, sometimes live streamed work. We've seen work happening on Zoom. We've seen work happening on Facebook Live and in other social media channels. One of the Asatesh South Africa staff members, Faye Balikagwa, was the first person to create a WhatsApp piece of theatre in South Africa live for last year's National Arts Festival. And she has since done other work around WhatsApp. And WhatsApp has proved to be a very interesting delivery tool for work because it is more accessible for many people and it is cheaper for them to access. In a country like ours with such intense poverty, where we literally have half the country who is living below the breadline, we are one of the most unequal societies in the world. To expect people to be able to access the arts online is really nonsensical. Although we do have a very strong mobile coverage, many people cannot afford data, they don't have access to Wi-Fi, and so one has to really be innovative around the kinds of tools that one is using to reach people. I think also what's really important in this time is that we need to remember the roots of theatre and the fact that theatre is in the end a live encounter. It's about that sharing of space and time. And when we can't share space, we need to at least share some degree of liveness. And so we've seen things like Facebook Live providing a platform which can give us at least some sense of what it is to be able to respond to an audience in real time. Asateer South Africa has taken some of its work onto Facebook Live and onto other platforms. For example, our storytelling has happened there, and that's been a wonderful thing because we've been able to really share stories from all the cultures and languages of South Africa, both within our country and across the continent and in fact the world. We've now had 50 stories recorded in all the languages of South Africa, and those are available on our website and also are being featured at the National Arts Festival at the moment. And prior to that, we had at least 50 stories. It was a year's worth of stories which were recorded and have been placed on both our website and the website of our partner Play Africa, the children's museum that is based at Constitution Hill in Johannesburg. So storytelling has become a big thing and something that we've been able to share with artists from across the continent and with audiences around the world. We've also seen that we've been able to do a lot of creative development of work online in this space. So artists have been collaborating with one another using Zoom. We have been doing mentorship programs with international collaborations with the Netherlands, with Belgium, with the US and writers from different parts of the world. And this has proved to be a space that has provided artists at least with some sense of purpose, some sense of being able to create something that hopefully post-pandemic can be shared with the world. In the case of our dance mentorship, we moved our project from being, originally it was going to be partner work duets that were being created. It became solo work because of lockdown. And then we were able to share extracts of that work with a WhatsApp festival called My Body, My Space, created by the Forgotten Angle Theatre Collective. And so artists were able to share the work that they'd created in at least some kind of way with audiences. And we're hoping that that work can now be taken further and that we'll be able to continue to develop it and take it into schools once we are back into a slightly more normal environment. One of the other things that happened is we were able, in a window when we were able to take work into schools, to do workshops and performances around asthma awareness. And that was a wonderful project that was very successful and toured to schools in KZN. So Asateer South Africa and Theatre for Young Audiences has been very busy during this time. We've also been finding ways to get the arts to children who can't reach us or connect with us virtually through creating hard copy materials. So we've been creating activity books along with some partners, the Western Cape Government and a partner called the Learning Trust and Laureate Sport for Good Foundation, to create resources that children can use at home to be creative themselves. And these we have produced in now 6 languages of South Africa, and over 200,000 of those have gone out to children, largely to children who were standing in food queues or who were going to some kind of a creche where they were able to then receive this hard copy material. It's been a very difficult time. Artists have been hit hard by the pandemic. Despite all the activity that I've been describing, it's clear that online work does not carry with it the same kind of economic support that the live theatre does. And so most artists are having to supplement their income either through looking for relief funds of some kind or through turning their hand to other kinds of work. And for many of them, this has been difficult, if not impossible. So we've seen a big rise in unemployment and certainly a lot of desperation amongst artists. As a result, we've been very involved in the development of a foundation, the STAND Foundation, which is Sustaining Theatre and Dance South Africa Foundation, to try and support artists during this time, to raise funding for artists and to create projects where artists can be involved and can earn something within these projects. We've also been lobbying government to administer the relief funds in a better, more viable way for artists. We've had a lot of work to do on that score, and while there have been relief funds, unfortunately these have often been very poorly managed, so we've had to really hold government to account. So it's been a period of activism and advocacy and of connection, I think, for the arts, in the sense that artists have really had to come together. Right now we are in a situation where we've just had what I would consider to be a coordinated attack, a kind of insurrection really in our country, where it seems that certain forces within the ruling party and from outside the ruling party have conspired to attack supply systems, basic infrastructure, and that's been happening in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng in particular. It has impacted very deeply on some of our staff members, on artists that are members of Asatesh, people that we work with in those places, and we are very concerned about the impact on our country more generally. Thankfully, there seems to have been some restoration of order, and we are now in a slightly better position a week on into the violence and looting and mayhem that happened. But certainly the arts are going to be impacted for a long time to come, because there are so many basic needs that need to be taken care of. So if you are listening to this message, if you're interested in South Africa, if you know anybody here, please think about supporting those wonderful organizations that are providing relief at this time. One of the best of those is the Gift of the Givers, and you can find them online as well. They're a relief organization that does extraordinary work, and that you can be assured that if you give any donation to them, they'll be using it very, very wisely for the good of the poorest of the poor. So thanks for listening to this message. I hope it's given you some insight into what's happening in South Africa in terms of theatre and in terms of our society at this time.